Okay, I wanted to say a few words about SOPA. Now, SOPA, it's called, this legislation moving through Congress. And it's going to be discussed in a major way in January, coming January. Now, I want to say a few things about this. First off, I have read the proposals regarding SOPA, what this legislation actually entails. And the language, to me, is pretty much like the Patriot Act. You know, it is so vague, it can be interpreted either way by the powers at hand. Now, you've got two competing factions here in terms of this legislation, and that what I'm trying to say here, in case you don't know what SOPA is about, okay, it's about restrictions on the internet, okay, and how the internet per se is going to be governed from here on out. Now, you've got two competing factions here, both of them with commercial interests, no doubt. Okay, you've got Google on the one hand, YouTube, various other video sites, various other ISPs out there. You know, they all are looking out for their own commercial interests, because we're bombarded with commercials, right? And I'm not exactly a fan of Google, Yahoo, and all these major search engines and so on, because it's basically, you know, it's basically evolving into a huge monopoly and so on. On the other hand, okay, you've got the motion picture industry and the, you know, Hollywood people. And the question of protecting copyright issues for artists and intellectual property. So that's basically the crux of the argument. Now, don't get me wrong. I am completely in favor of copyright issues for artists, for any kind of intellectual property rights. You know, if you're the originator of something, then yeah, you should retain some right over who is going to be paid those royalties, you know. On the other hand, this proposal being brought forth in Congress is rather draconian in its nature. Because the entire interpretation of copyright violations and so on, you know, pirating of movies and from, you know, other countries, other websites located in other countries, stealing intellectual property and so on. That is, you know, it's not an issue that can be ignored, no. But the legislation is too broad in its definition. Simply because it gives federal authorities too much power over the internet, period. Now, whether you want to talk about intellectual property, the commercial property, or anything else, all it takes within this little spectrum of legislation is for some guy or some lobby within the federal government that decides some website or URL should be taken down and not or no longer accessible to U.S. citizens, period. So what they do is they're going to issue a court order to your ISP, your internet service provider, basically, and they're going to say you can't host that content anymore. You have to shut that URL down, or else. Now, ostensibly, this whole thing came about because of protecting copyrights, but the enforcement mechanism is just simply too draconian, in my view, because you could easily imagine, some corporate lobby or government figure or whatever else deciding that they don't like certain content on the web. And, the excuse is going to be, yeah, well, this URL is promoting child porn or whatever. I mean, it's a legitimate concern, don't get me wrong, but it could also be used in terms of a political dissent. Because all that needs to happen is that something needs to get flagged by the feds that says you've got to take that URL down, investigate it, or else, otherwise, your ISP is going to be shut down. I think these issues could be resolved in another matter. And I would basically support at this point total opposition to this. And there are several companies, including Google, YouTube, and everybody else that I hate, on here. Basically, I'm not a YouTube, Google, fanatic. Okay, I know they have their own control over us. Okay, but there are also, other outlets like, CNET, CNTNet. And you can look into the technology community. Even Mozilla is getting on board and saying, this is not right. Or what is happening here is not right. So what they're proposing prior to this legislation being debated on the House floor is a complete blackout of the internet as we know it. This would be the nuclear option, of course, because then we all realize who controls what, right? Because if Google and YouTube and all these other commercial sites can shut down your access to the internet, then we know that they actually do have some power. On the other hand, they can also curtail the power of the government, per se. These are the same kinds of measures being employed in China, in in various other countries where you simply cannot get to an URL because you're going to get a message saying, no, you're not allowed to view this. It's not available in your country. Well, what the hell? In that case, in that particular case, I will side with Google and the tech companies and say, this is bullshit, We might not be all smart enough to make up our own minds about the content, but if we don't have access to content, then what are we even talking about? I mean, if I can't view some channel from Iran or from Russia or whatever, wherever else, Uzbekistan or something, because my government has blocked the access to that channel. I can't even know about this. It's like it doesn't exist, I think, to some degree, internal controls work. To a larger degree, no, they don't. But I don't think U.S. citizens have been so much dumbed down to where they believe that the government, or essentially their lobbyists, are allowed to censor everything on the net. And this is draconian. So please do something about it and contact your whatever Congress member. I have to tell you, this has a very good chance of passing. And if it does, and the change is going to be almost imperceptible for the average viewer here in the United States, because it will come very slowly. You know, all it takes is for the feds to accuse some website overseas of saying, well, look, you know, they pirated some content, you got to shut that thing down. When in actuality, you know, it was just an opposing viewpoint in political terms. In political terms. And this is why this language is so dangerous, because it can be as broadly interpreted as the Patriot Act, or, you know, the Military Commissions Act, or anything else out there, which is completely open to interpretation without limit. Without limit. I mean, we're descending into some totalitarian society where the society itself accepts what's coming from above. You know, as long as you're entertained long enough by comedians on TV, by all the shit on the networks, and all the crap in the newspapers, and now the crap is invading the internet as well, you know. It's all becoming one big, huge mess. People aren't able to concentrate on anything anymore because they're bombarded with so much conflicting information. There is no more sustained attention span whatsoever. And that, of course, is either the goal or the unintended consequence of all this. So my personal opinion is you should try everything you can to stop this legislation, because it will be harmful. It will just, you know, be another stepping stone to tyranny, in intellectual tyranny in this country. And I say this as someone who, you know, I started out as an artist, and of course, you know, I respect intellectual property rights. I don't want my stuff out there without getting some royalties or something like that. I mean, it's not like I worked for free and here you go, you know, take it or leave it. No, it's not like that, you know. If somebody makes a living from their art or from their writing. But this is much more insidious, because it can be used against you in so many ways. And I just believe this legislation is uncalled for and dangerous. It's just another stepping stone. And, you know, 10 years from now, nobody will even think about it. They'll just think whatever they see on the web, that's just it. Hey, everything's great. Just like my TV. I watch the TV networks and, well, must be true if I see it. We're going down the wrong path here. So that's my video for today, or tonight rather.